Welcome back to Epilepsy Moms, episode 5, part 2. Liz is going to continue with her story of what happened when they found out their daughter had epilepsy. My name is Summer, and my son has generalized epilepsy with absent seizures and tonic-clonic seizures.
And my name is Liz, and my daughter has focal epilepsy with focal seizures in her temporal lobe.
So let's get into it and hear what happened next.
The second half of her story is, it's a crazy journey at the same time as being really kind of amazing, because we were shown what a good doctor is like, and not many people get that opportunity to have a good doctor. Some people have to be stuck because they aren't able to travel. So months later, we got our first appointment at the new hospital that we were going to start traveling to. Now, we travel 5 hours away, and yes, it is sometimes on a whim, which we have done before, that we have to go travel overnight. We try not to have to unless we have to. And we've had to do it a couple times, and it's definitely, those last minute appointments are really hard to get. But if you advocate for your daughter or your son, we had to advocate for our daughter. And luckily our doctor was constantly trying to get her in also for last minute appointments. So she worked her butt off of several occasions, trying to get us in. So we met our new doctor, and we first started off with just a doctor's appointment, a med check. And when we went in, there was a list of medications, and she started looking at it and she was like, oh, wow. We need to get her levels checked so that we can basically have a start over, just a complete do-over and start from the beginning, basically. And she's seen what she had been on and what she knew that doctor previously had, I don't want to say negligent, but just wasn't doing her part at getting levels checked and making sure that my daughter was safe. And she was still on 2 medications, but I had told her that we had tried, a third one and it didn't work. So anyways, she took her off of, I think, all medications except for one. And then she tried it with a new combination. She was just messing with the combinations that she knew would have probably worked. And I just needed to trust this new doctor. And she seemed to really know her stuff. Any questions that my husband and I had, she would immediately answer, not only just answer them, but explain everything that we needed to make us feel comfortable, safe, secure, and know that we are able to trust her. She's literally one of the best doctors that we could have ever asked for. And the trip was completely worth it. My husband and I both looked at each other and was like, just relieved. And we felt like this was the best thing that we did. We have had 38 trips since September 11th, 2017, with 10 hospital stays, including 8 EEGs, 5 MRIs, 2 neuropsych appointments, 1 PET scan, and 1 fMRI. The rest were just med checks and doctor's appointments. We have been through a lot with her. It seems once a year that she has a massive relapse and it always seems to be in the fall to the winter time, where she begins to fail her meds or she fully fails her meds. And we have to either get them, the meds adjusted or take her off meds. We have to do something, get a new combination. And she'll have anywhere from several when she's in a relapse to almost 100 seizures a day. It takes a couple weeks to a month to really get those high numbers of seizures when meds are failing. But it still is really a rough time for her. Sometimes, there's been other occasions where it has taken longer just than a month to get them to be those high numbers, but about once a year, it does get to about that point, and it's always the same seizure. So she's always having focal seizures. We end up having to travel back and forth to our doctor. And like I said, it's 5 hours away. There was one time where we were at home. We had just finished being over at our doctor's office, 5 hours away. And we ended up coming home just to be readmitted. We had been there for a week. So we came home just to be readmitted here at our hometown hospital. And that was hard because that ended up being 2 full weeks in the hospital just to control her. The thing that they did for my daughter, they had to check with the doctor that we traveled to because that's not her home doctor. Her home doctor, her consistent doctor is not here in our hometown. So they weren't allowed to just increase meds. They weren't allowed to give her rescue med without the other doctors knowing, because she has an entire team where we go to. She has an entire team. There's about 15 people on her team that are constantly checking in with us, that had, they've been with us throughout this whole journey almost since we started traveling. Now people ask all the time what her seizures look like. She has focal epilepsy in her temporal lobe, which is located on the side of her head, the left side of her head, just right above her ear. So it's about right here, and it's just right above her ear. And she will get this sour look on her face, and she'll start tensing up with her arms. And sometimes she'll often not just stiffen her arms, but her arms will go, or her hand will go straight to her throat or her hand or her face. And she'll let out a noise that sounds kind of like she's either itching her throat or snorting. It will start with lots of mouth quivering or chattering. Her eyes will twitch at the same time. She's not normally scared because she always knows that I'm there. Most of the time when she's having seizures, I'm either right by her, or I'm sleeping in the same room with her. She normally starts having them when she's asleep. Not normally do they happen very often when she's awake. Normally when she's in a relapse is when they start happening, when she's awake, and she's having multiple at night and multiple in the daytime. But normally we can control them during the daytime before we start controlling them at night, if that makes sense. A couple years ago, we started the process of trying to proceed with surgery. They had mentioned that they were able to do, a possible surgery, and they were talking about a temporal resection. A temporal resection is a temporal lobe resection, also called a temporal lobendectomy. Is this surgery? It can lower the number of seizures that you have, or make them less severe, or it can even stop them from happening. During the operation, the doctor removes some part of the brain where the seizures start. And I actually got this definition off of Google. If you look up temporal resection or a temporal lobendectomy. We started the process, and the doctor kept taking it to the board and getting the situation reevaluated. Once COVID hit, all the surgeries were on pause unless they were an emergency. That year was really hard because we didn't fit into that category. One time during COVID, during the shutdown, she ended up having almost like a grand mal type or tonic-clonic. So she'd had more of like that shaking type, and I had never seen one before. So it didn't scare me, but it was just more of that, like, what do I do? Like, our doctor is 5 hours away. Are we traveling right now? Like, it was really scary. We didn't know, so we decided to wait to see if it happened again. And she ended up not having another one. So we pushed through and recently tried again. After all the surgeries came back, we tried, getting her back onto the schedule, getting her with a surgeon. And we ended up getting her off her meds for 1 week and did a 1-week EEG so that they can do her reevaluation. We did a neuropsych test again. We did an fMRI, all the things to find out. Basically, they don't know where her seizures or how far her seizures are into her brain. And that was really frustrating because we had done all these things to work up to during doing surgery, and we were getting all of our ducks in a row just to find out that they, when we were off of her meds for that whole week, she didn't perform that week. It ended up being, we had to go back another 2 weeks later, I think it was. And this was just recently in August. And we ended up going back, and that's when we had the doctor's appointment, and she was explaining to us, if you pull out your brain and unravel it, it's 15 centimeters long. So if you wind it back up into the layers add up to 6 layers of brain in the human body. So when, there's lots of layers. For my daughter, we don't know how far into her brain that these seizures are happening. So she was explaining to us on the EEG that she was showing us her muscle movements overpower her seizures, which is very strange because you can see the seizure activity, but you can also see the muscle movements over the seizure activity, which is not normal. So she was talking to us about doing, she wanted to send her test results over to a different lab to try and get them modified to see if they can see anything underneath the muscle movements. I mean, there's a lot of other things connected to it. Meanwhile, like I said before, they don't know how far it is. So not only is there just more testing, they're constantly coming up with new things in the brain. We're having a hard time deciding what the best option to do is. So far, we are just kind of taking it day by day, unless something new comes up and they can figure it out better. They did talk to us about doing a needle insert into her temporal lobe that has a lead on one end and the scope, which is like a camera on the other end, they would insert it to see how deep it would be in her brain. But that's really invasive. And they had talked about doing an SEEG, but normally with an SEEG, which is a surgical implantation of the electrodes onto the brain in order to better localize the seizure focus. It's basically pre-surgery, which is something that she would have to be bedbound and not be able to get up unless she was going to do surgery. That's not something that they would normally mess with. It's normally a last minute thing that they do. So now we wait. Now it is time for just God to provide either more answers or wait for her to be healed. I'm not sure what is next in our journey. Or our tagline is at the end, her journey has not been over yet, and it's only beginning. And she could have lots of years left of this, or, we're constantly praying that she is healed soon. I'm sure there is so much more in this story that I have not said, but it's basically her story from start to now, with little pieces in the middle that have probably just been irrelevant or not remembered. Thank you so much for listening and being with us while we talk about my story and my daughter's story. Our next episode will be Summer asking some questions that she has written down while I have been explaining the story about my daughter. And we really appreciate you listening. Make sure that you like, subscribe, and comment below.
We'd love to hear from you.
Your story is not over.
Your story is just begun.